Barbara Mandrell walked away from one of the most beloved shows on television, at the height of its success. No farewell tour, no warning, just silence. For over 40 years, fans have wondered, why would she end it all? When the Mandrell sisters were just getting started. Now, at 76, Barbara has finally opened up. And the truth behind why she ended Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell sisters, the truth she's kept to herself for decades, is leaving fans in tears. Because it wasn't just about her voice. It was about something she couldn't say out loud. Not until now. In the early 1980s, there wasn't a family more beloved on television than the Mandrell sisters. Barbara, Louise, and Irlene weren't just country music royalty. They were part of America's living room every week. Their variety show, Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters, blended music, comedy, and sisterly charm in a way no one had done before. The chemistry was effortless, the harmonies were tight, and the laughter, genuine. Barbara was the front woman, the center of it all. Her range on stage was unmatched. She could play dozens of instruments, dance, tell jokes, and belt a heartbreaking ballad all in the same hour. Louise was the steady, soulful one, and Irlene, the youngest, brought a youthful sparkle and quick wit that balanced everything out. Together, they weren't just performers, they were a unit. And for 2 seasons, that unity lit up screens across the country. The show was a hit right out of the gate. Viewers loved the wholesome energy, the glamour, the feeling of watching real sisters genuinely enjoy one another. In an era before streaming, this was appointment television. It was fun, it was family, it was familiar, and it was Barbara's name on the marquee, but never at the cost of her sister's shine. But behind the curtain, the pace was brutal. Barbara wasn't just starring in a variety show. She was still recording albums, touring as a solo artist, and appearing at award shows and benefits. The demand on her time and her voice was staggering. And though the viewers at home saw a flawless hour of entertainment each week, the truth was more complicated. For Barbara, the success wasn't just about the numbers. It came with a cost. She later admitted she was pushing herself past the point of exhaustion. Her voice, her livelihood was suffering. Her energy was stretched thin. And for someone who had grown up in the spotlight since childhood, the pressure was beginning to erode her joy. But no one expected her to walk away. And when she did, it shocked the industry. The Mandrell sisters were at the top of their game. Their ratings were strong. Their fan base was loyal. They were just getting started. There was no farewell episode, no grand exit, just an announcement. The show was over, and the sisters wouldn't return. Barbara told the press it was due to vocal strain, that she needed to protect her instrument if she wanted to continue recording music. It was a graceful explanation, a diplomatic one, and fans accepted it, at least on the surface. But those closest to the family, and fans who had watched every episode with devotion, began to wonder, was that the whole story? Why didn't they reunite later, even after Barbara's voice recovered? Why didn't they come back together just once, for the fans? What happened behind the scenes that no one dared speak about? As the years passed, the silence between the sisters became louder than any harmony they ever sang. Louise and Irlene continued with individual projects, but the trio that had once seemed inseparable stayed apart. And Barbara? She kept going on her own. Now, decades later, with the spotlight far behind her, Barbara Mandrell is finally ready to tell the truth. Not just about the show's ending, but about what it cost her, and what it did to the bond she shared with her sisters. For the public, Barbara Mandrell was unstoppable. By the time Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell sisters premiered in 1980, she wasn't just a performer, she was a phenomenon. She'd already won Country Music Association's Entertainer of the Year twice, and her albums were selling millions. She could play over 20 instruments, switch from gospel to pop country in a heartbeat, and command the stage like no one else. And yet, behind the sparkle and steel of her showbiz polish, Barbara was quietly unraveling. The schedule was relentless. Filming the variety show was a full-time commitment on its own, but Barbara didn't stop there. She continued touring, recording albums, and maintaining a packed public appearance calendar. On top of that, she was expected to maintain her role as the family anchor. The eldest sister, the show's lead, the one who held it all together. She was still in her early 30s, but her health was slipping. Her voice, which had carried her since she was a child prodigy, began to falter under the weight of overuse and exhaustion. She later confessed that her vocal cords were so strained during the show's run, she feared permanent damage. What few people knew was that Barbara was also battling another invisible force: the pressure to be everything to everyone. She wasn't just the star of the show. She was the brand, the glue, the expectation. Her name was on the banner. Her career carried the show's credibility. And while her sisters shone in their own right, it was Barbara who bore the responsibility if anything slipped. That weight quietly started to change her. Those close to her began noticing she wasn't herself. The joyful spark that once lit up every stage entrance had dulled. Her laughter, once effortless, now came out tired. Barbara was doing what she had always done: showing up, giving everything, and never letting the audience see her pain. But off camera, the cracks were beginning to show. Barbara has never spoken ill of her sisters. There was no dramatic falling out, no public feud. But in recent years, she's allowed small truths to rise to the surface. One of them, she felt isolated. Not by her sisters personally, but by the role she had to play. She was the eldest, the overachiever, the responsible one, and in many ways she was expected to lead without asking for help. And when the show's demands became too much, Barbara felt she couldn't bring the decision to her sisters. She felt she had to carry the responsibility herself, to end it, to take the blame, to walk away. It was easier to say it was about her voice. And in some ways it was. But deep down, Barbara knew something else. The moment she said, "I can't do this anymore," the thing that connected the three of them, the stage, the show, the audience, would disappear. And she wasn't sure they'd ever find their way back. She chose self-preservation. But even now, decades later, you can hear the weight of that choice in her voice. Because she didn't just step away from a television show. She stepped away from a version of her life that was built on unity, sisterhood, and shared purpose. And once that was gone, nothing was quite the same. The show never returned. The trio never reunited on television. And over time, Barbara Mandrell began stepping further and further away from the spotlight. But the decision that saved her voice may have quietly broken something else. Louise and Irlene Mandrell didn't fight the decision. At least not publicly. When Barbara ended the Mandrell Sisters show in 1982, the official story was simple. Barbara needed to rest her voice. The network released a statement. The fans mourned the loss. But Louise and Irlene? They didn't say much at all. They didn't complain, they didn't point fingers, and they never contradicted Barbara's version of events. But the silence said enough. In interviews years later, both sisters reflected on that time with bittersweet tones. They praised Barbara's talent, acknowledged how hard she worked, and spoke warmly of their time on the show. But underneath the smiles and grace, there was a faint undercurrent, something that hinted at unfinished business. Something that suggested they, too, were caught off guard by the ending. After all, they were in their prime. Louise had begun earning recognition as a vocalist and musician in her own right. Irlene was growing in popularity, both for her comedic timing and her presence on the drums, a rarity for female performers at the time. Together, the three had become more than sisters. They were a brand, a family unit that viewers fell in love with. So when it ended suddenly, without a farewell special, without a final curtain call, it felt less like a finale and more like an abrupt disappearance. And for Louise and Irlene, the message was clear. This wasn't their decision. Barbara didn't mean to hurt them. That much is clear in everything she's said since. Her love for her sisters has never been in question. But the choice she made, necessary as it was for her own well-being, left behind a trail of unanswered questions, and perhaps some unspoken wounds. They never publicly reunited in the same way. No revival shows, no anniversary specials, no full-on-stage reunion to bring closure to the millions who adored them. And while all three sisters continued to have individual success, Barbara with her solo career, Louise with her own albums, and Irlene with television appearances, their trio identity was never reclaimed. Barbara once admitted that walking away from the show felt like laying down a piece of her life she couldn't get back. But what she didn't say, what she didn't need to say, was that it may have cost her more than just a role or a routine. It may have cost her a chapter of closeness with her sisters that could never be repeated. Fans often assumed they would reunite someday, that the Mandrell sisters would return for a special, a tour, or at least one final televised performance. But it never came, and as the years stretched on, that silence began to speak louder than anything else. In recent reflections, Barbara has acknowledged that the decision to end the show, while medically necessary, was also emotionally devastating, not just for her, but for the bond they shared. She admitted that it created a space between them, one that was never quite filled again. Not a feud, not bitterness, just distance. Quiet, respectful, permanent distance. For viewers who saw them laugh and sing together every week, it's a hard truth to accept. Because the show wasn't just entertainment, it was family. Felt like being welcomed into a sisterhood. And when Barbara walked away, it didn't just end a show. It ended a moment in time that never fully came back. Now, decades later, as Barbara finally speaks openly about what led to her decision, fans are feeling something unexpected. Not just sadness, but mourning. Because deep down, many are realizing they never got to say goodbye either. When Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters ended in 1982, it felt abrupt. And for many fans, it felt temporary. Surely this was just a break. Barbara would rest, her voice would recover, and the sisters would return with even more to give. But that moment never came. Barbara went on to release more solo albums. She won awards, performed in sold-out venues, and remained a staple of the country music world well into the 90s. But something had changed. While her music stayed strong, her public presence softened. The fire and sparkle that once defined her stage persona gave way to something quieter, more reflective, more reserved. She eventually retired from performing altogether in 1997, stepping fully out of the spotlight to focus on her family and faith. It was a graceful exit on her terms, but to many it felt incomplete, because the Mandrell sisters never stood on stage together again. There were no reunion tours, no joint interviews revisiting the glory days, no anniversary specials where they laughed about the chaos of live television and the bond they once shared. Occasionally, fans would see them photographed together at family events or country music tributes. But the trio as fans remembered it, that chapter was closed. Louise Mandrell continued performing and recording, carving out her own identity apart from the show. She starred in her own live productions and became known for her patriotism and theatrical performances. Irlene pursued a television career, branching into acting and variety work on her own. Both sisters remained active, but always in separate lanes. And rarely, if ever, did they publicly revisit what the three of them built together. And yet, their fans never stopped asking. For decades, the questions lingered. Why didn't they reunite? Was there a falling out? Did Barbara feel guilt? Were the sisters hurt? Was the silence a form of protection, or a wound no one knew how to heal? Barbara never accused. She never explained much beyond what she'd said all along. Her voice needed rest. But now, at 76, the way she speaks about that decision has shifted. It's softer, more personal, and for the first time, there's an edge of sorrow beneath her carefully chosen words. She recently acknowledged that ending the show meant more than just stepping back from TV. It meant closing a door on a moment in time that could never be recreated. It wasn't just a show, she reflected. It was part of who we were. That simple sentence landed with fans like a stone in still water, because for so long, they thought of it as just another cancellation. Now they're realizing it was something deeper, a choice that reshaped not just Barbara's career, but her connection to her sisters, and to them. Country music is full of stories about heartbreak, sacrifice, and family. But the Mandrell sisters' story is unique because it's not about betrayal or scandal. It's about silence, about a decision that had to be made, and the lingering ache it left behind. Even now, fans comment on old clips from the show, marveling at the harmony, the warmth, the easy banter between three sisters who seemed unstoppable. "Why did this end?" one viewer asks. "I miss them together," says another. And the truth is, so does Barbara. She once carried it all, her sisters, her voice, the expectations of millions. And when the weight became too much, she laid it down. But in doing so, she left behind a version of her life that could never be reclaimed. The fans never forgot, and neither did she. Today, Barbara Mandrell lives far from the spotlight she once owned. She no longer tours, no longer records, and rarely appears in public. She's 76 now, and by all accounts, content with the quiet life she built after decades of noise. But every now and then, a memory slips through. In recent reflections, rare, soft-spoken interviews, and memoir-style recollections, Barbara has begun to speak about the things she once avoided. Not with bitterness, not with drama, but with the clear-eyed honesty of someone who has lived long enough to see the full picture. And when she talks about Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters, the tone shifts. She doesn't dwell on the show's success, though it was massive. She doesn't list awards or ratings. What she lingers on is the feeling, the energy between them, the trust, the rhythm that came so naturally when the three of them were together on stage, smiling like they had nothing to prove. It's that feeling, she admits, that she misses most. "I didn't realize how special it was until it was over," she once said quietly. Barbara's never framed her decision as a mistake. Her vocal health truly was at risk. Continuing the show could have cost her long-term damage, not just to her voice, but to her body and mind. She did what she had to do, but now, all these years later, she's also beginning to say what she couldn't back then, that the cost was far greater than she expected, because when she stepped back to save herself, she couldn't save everything else. She couldn't save the trio. She couldn't hold the bond together the way it had once been. And though there was no fight, no fracture, something went missing between them. Closeness, a shared rhythm, a joy that only lived on stage. She said she wishes there had been time for one more performance. Not for fame, not for the fans. For them, for the sisters who made magic without even trying. But time passed. Life pulled them in different directions. And whatever that chemistry was, it stayed locked in those 2 brief seasons. Fans, meanwhile, are just now catching up to what was lost. YouTube clips of the old show continue to rack up millions of views. And now, as Barbara finally tells the full truth, not just the medical explanation, but the emotional weight behind it, those questions hit even harder. She wasn't just exhausted. She was overwhelmed. She wasn't just protecting her voice. She was protecting herself from a pace that would have broken anyone. And in doing so, she gave up something irreplaceable. She never blamed her sisters, and they never blamed her. But some distances aren't created by anger. They're created by absence, by choosing survival over sacrifice. And that's a decision only those who've lived long enough to carry both can truly understand. Barbara's legacy in country music is unshakable. Her talent, her professionalism, her decades of discipline. They've earned her a permanent place in American culture. But it's her silence, now finally broken, that may resonate most. Because behind every spotlight is a shadow. And behind every strong woman is a cost she rarely talks about. Until now, for decades, fans waited, hoped, for one more moment, one more harmony, one more laugh between sisters on stage. It never came. And now, as Barbara Mandrell finally shares what that decision really cost her, fans are realizing something they hadn't let themselves feel. They never got to say goodbye. Not to the show, not to the trio, not to that golden moment in time when everything felt whole. Barbara doesn't ask for sympathy. She never has. But the truth she's finally telling at 76 is the one many fans weren't ready to hear. That even the strongest voices go quiet. And sometimes what saves you also separates you. She did what she had to do, and she's only now letting herself grieve what it took. For those who remember the sparkle, the sisterhood, the Saturday nights spent laughing with the Mandrells, the ache is real, because now we know. It was never just a show. It was a bond, a moment, a goodbye no one saw coming. For more emotional stories, check out this video.